Today, we are talking about organizing your podcasting workflow, and I've got 5 strategies here on how to help you figure that out. Let's get started.
Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening? How are you doing today? I want to say thank you so much for being here. I am Chris, and I am from the original Chris and Christine Show podcast. You can find out every single thing about that show on a website which I built all by myself. Yeah, check that out at chrisandchristineshow.com. And if you can't remember that, which sounds pretty easy to me, there is a link to it in the show notes of this very episode. So how is your podcast coming along? Do you even have a podcast? What are you struggling with when it comes to your podcast? How long have you been making your podcast? If you've been podcasting for any length of time, like I have, you start to collect a lot of data and storage and audio files and video files and pictures and all kinds of logos you've created over the years and all kinds of goodies and stuff. And where do you keep all your wonderful stuff? Because you do collect stuff after a while. Do you delete it? Do you keep it? Do you put it on a drive in the cloud somewhere? Do you keep it on a separate hard drive located in your office somewhere? How do you manage all your storage? How much storage do you really possibly have? You know, when we first started the Chris and Christine Show, I first got a hold of a copy of Audacity. I'm not sure what version it was. I was using my old Windows PC computer. It was a HP computer, a tower computer, something like that. I bought it years ago before I even thought about even getting into podcasting. I had bought this computer because I need a new computer. And you know, it usually goes, you have an older computer, it's slower, whatever. You might see one on sale, so you go pick that one up and that kind of thing and all that great, wonderful stuff. So that computer was a decent computer at the time. And listen, I was able to launch the Chris and Christine Show podcast right from it and on it, even though it was not as powerful as this new MacBook Pro I'm using today. And it held up. It did some basic video stuff with it too. I could do, your usual audio editing, things like that. But I did notice that with that old computer, at least compared to the new one, it was so much slower just to render an MP3 file, especially, or even a WAV file or anything like that, any big major files. And now that I use a lot of the real-time effects that Audacity has introduced into the new updates, the old computer could never keep up with that. It would never be able to pull off what I can do today. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today is now that I've evolved so much since then, I have collected and made so many different shows. I actually had bought and installed a second 2 terabyte hard drive into the old computer, which is I still have the computer. It's not hooked up to anything. It's just sitting here in this little cabinet here. It's just, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Maybe I'll use it one day. I don't know. Maybe I'll give it to the kids. I don't know. But all the original files are still on there. Now, I've transferred them off there since then. But in that computer stores everything we've ever did for the computer and everything we did via photos, videos, and of course, all the audio podcast stuff. Now, I know that however you do your podcast, when you first get started, we don't really think about long-term bulk storage, when you're first starting out, because I didn't. I recorded the first episode. It saved it in its own unique Audacity folder file. It created a file, and it started sending anything I created in Audacity went into that file folder. In fact, I still have a copy of that file folder on my drive. Well, I'll get into that later. But in the early days of recording episodes, I just made like one folder where I had created a cool little intro, which I made myself with some music and some sound effects of applause. And I kind of changed my voice a little bit to kind of make it sound like not me, other than hiring an actual voice actor to do our intro for us. I kind of did my own, and I kind of tweaked the pitch and treble and the bass, kind of played around with all the settings within Audacity to make myself sound a little different than I do. And I did that for the intro, and I saved that file as an MP3 in Audacity folder, plus any new episodes we made all got dumped into this generic Audacity folder. And as we got more music and more intros and promos and different things we started collecting, and of course with guests too, I started making subfolders within that Audacity original folder. So the Audacity folder I had kind of became like the major folder for everything podcasting, was that one big giant folder. Now, however you podcast, now however you manage your files or however you think about doing it, I would suggest you should really, from early on, figure out a way to get organized and organize your files. And you should think about long-term storage and storage solutions. You might think right now, my little MP3 file, it's not very big, or my little WAV file, whatever, however you save your podcast. These files aren't very big if you're talking audio only. But I'm going to tell you how big they can get. I'm going to share with you all of the files that I have. I actually had to look all of them up and had to do the math on them, get the calculator out and figure out how much storage space all of my audio files I have currently for all the projects that I do audio-wise. Now, I'm not talking any video. This is just strictly audio only. This is how much storage space so far I am using as of today, as I record this right now, how much actual data storage space I'm using just for my audio files as I speak right now. But before I tell you that massive number, I'm going to tell you that I actually like to save every single thing I can when it comes to the podcasting stuff, because you just never know if you have to go back and fix something or re-edit something or share something or whatever. And I know storage for the most part is fairly cheap. Although on my MacBook, if you own a MacBook computer, you probably know this, they do not come with a lot of memory, a lot of storage built into these things. If you want to spend the money, you might get up to 1 terabyte of storage space. And I know with all these files, I'm going to tell you right now how much data I've been using so far. I need way bigger than that. So I actually have an external hard drive. I think it's a 12 terabyte external hard drive. Now I'm thinking maybe that's not big enough. And I haven't even got into major video recording stuff. Now I know if you do, if you produce a video show to go with your audio podcast, you're doing both. And if you're doing 4K, oh my goodness, I can only imagine how much storage that eats up. But like I said, storage, external hard drives usually aren't that much. It's when you get into the cloud drive storage, which can cost some money for renting space on a cloud storage option. But if you do that option with the cloud storage, there's a chance of you forgetting to update your credit card information. They lock you out, or perhaps maybe you don't make a payment because your credit card got expired. You didn't change the number on it, and therefore they remove your files. Or perhaps maybe you forget the password, you lock yourself out, so on and so forth. I know cloud storage is great, and you probably should have things stored on the cloud somewhere just in case there's a fire or something, or your computer gets, dumped in the bathtub. I don't know. However you operate your show, there's always a chance you can lose files. I get that. But what I do is I keep multiple drives, multiple places to store things. That way, just in case one of these things go down, I still have it. At least I should in theory. I mean, having everything go down, losing files everywhere, well, it does happen. But the chance of that is kind of slim. So with these MacBooks having very small hard drives, I only keep the things I need, the projects I'm working on at the moment, on the actual computer. And when they're done, I usually only keep an MP3 version file on the computer, and the rest of it gets thrown away. But I do keep everything on the external hard drives. Now, how much data am I physically using at this moment for all of my audio files? Not video, just audio only. I had to add them all up, and the grand total came to 1.3 terabytes of data storage I am currently using. Now, that's across the Chris and Christine Show, Podtastic Audio, the kids had a show, the Gem Boy Show. I have a radio station, K2 Radio. All the music files are on there, plus a client show. That's 5 different big projects. Oh, don't forget all of the audio demos I did. That's all anything audio related at all. Music we might use, music beds for shows or intros, different sound effects. I got a ton of sound effects. Anything that's audio related that I can use for a podcast or project that's audio related only, it's all saved. That's 1.3 terabytes of storage space I'm physically using as of right now. And I do plan on to adding more to that pile because I continue to make podcasts for everybody. So it just keeps growing and growing. So how do I keep organized? How do I figure it all out? Within the hard drive, I obviously have multiple folders and multiple places I store things. So however you record your show and however you save your show, wherever you save your final files at, you should always have access to your podcast stuff, whether it's on a drive in your computer or an external drive or even the cloud storage. However you decide to do it, you should always have some kind of access to your old past episodes. Now, I know some people will just go and delete everything. Once they upload it to the server, the media host, they'll delete everything. But what if the media host loses your files or crashes or something? Now you're putting a lot of faith into your media host that you're going to be able to get the files back. And it's just going to be an MP3 file. But maybe that's all you care about. Maybe all you care about is the finished MP3 file. And that's fine. Like I said, you can podcast, you can create your show however you want to do it. Here today, I have ways that you can organize your podcast workflow with 5 ways that you, and as an audio podcaster, not talking video, it's just audio only, but this can apply for video too, doesn't matter. Storage is storage, files are files, and you're going to eat a lot of them up, and you're going to try to figure out a way to manage all these files when you get to episode 100, 200, 500, and you're talking a video versions too, and maybe if you cut them up, made little like TikTok versions or Instagram Reel versions, you have to figure out a way to manage all that stuff. Now, how are you going to do that? Here is the 5 ways that can help you manage all that stuff. Okay, kicking it off with number 1. Well, that's an obvious one here. It's establish a folder structure. Now, if you've been listening to this episode up until this point, you probably know that I've been preaching all about getting organized with some kind of file management system. Create a clear and consistent folder structure of all your podcast files. This could mean main folders for each section with subfolders. Yeah, you can go beneath the original folder for individual episodes. Like say you have a season and this is episode 1 in that season, episode 2 in that season. Or perhaps maybe it was part 1 of this guest, part 2 of another guest. Within the episode folders, organize files by type, such as raw recordings, edited files, transcripts, show notes, and promotional materials. You see, for each individual episode, this is what I kind of started doing, is that has its own folder, which could have a guest. It could have the image of the guest. It could have the actual finished episode total. It could be in there. It could be the raw audio, unedited audio of the guest in there too. Anything you need for that one episode. Oh, and also, well, I like to use Audacity. And if you save the project in Audacity, it becomes an Audacity file, not an audio file, an actual Audacity project file. Now, that Audacity project file, I also put in that subfolder, so I know everything I need to create that episode or everything I used to create that episode is in that subfolder, so I always have it ready to go. Okay, moving on to number 2, naming conventions. How do you name your podcast files? Do you name them just episode 1 or just 1, 2, 3? Or maybe you name them by the guest name, or perhaps maybe what the topic was in the name. I don't know how you do it. However you got to do it, adopt a systematic naming convention for your files, including episode numbers, titles, or relevant dates in your file names. Because sometimes we think, oh, that interview, I did that in 2020, or is it 2021? I don't remember. So maybe if you had the date attached to the file, it might be easier for you to find it. Consistent naming makes it easier to locate specific files and maintain a logical order in your storage. Because one thing with good storage, it's good naming and keeping things in some kind of order, which makes it so much easier to find it. Trust me, when you get to like 500 or 1,000 different files and you're trying to sort through them, having a name attached to it makes it so much easier in the search field. Okay, moving on to number 3. Now, number 3 is something I have personally never really used much because I just heard it doesn't do much as far as SEO, search engine optimization. Although people say it does, I do not know, but that is metadata embedding. We're talking ID3 tags here. Now, if you don't know, an ID3 tag, it actually is a metadata that's embedded into your audio files. including information such as the episode numbers, titles, descriptions, and cover art. You can even put cover art in here if you want to. This enhances the professionalism of your podcast and ensures that crucial information is attached to the audio files. Now, if you properly name the actual audio file, this shouldn't be an issue. You shouldn't have to worry about it too much. But I do know there are folks out there that live and die by ID3 tags. They got to put them in all their stuff and all that great, wonderful stuff, thinking that somehow when somebody accidentally stumbles across that audio file, they have no idea what's in the file. They can look at the metadata and it should tell them exactly what that file is, the notes, whatever it is you can put in there and possibly give you a better idea of what that episode is really about. Okay, so now we're moving on to number 4. Now, number 4 is something that I personally do use when I create my podcast episodes, and that is version control. Now, you want to implement version control for your podcast episodes. This is particularly important if multiple people are working on the same project. Or for yourself, if you are working on one project and you say you have the unedited version, or say you have one guest conversation, because I like to save everything as a multi-track. So I will have a audio track for person 1, person 2, person 3, and each one of those I will edit maybe individually, bring them in together, and then I will, of course, levelate them. And I do a lot of different things. So on each step that I do, I save a version of that step, and I'll say this is version 1, this is version 2, and this is the unedited, or this is the leveled version, or this is the raw version. Just add a little something to each version of it so you know which version you're working on. You see, using these tools or naming conventions to differentiate between drafts and final versions. And of course, you want to keep a record of the changes made during each editing step. So the final tip here on how you can organize your workflow through storage solutions for your podcast is you can use, of course, cloud-based collaboration. I've already mentioned this earlier. So you can leverage cloud storage solutions like Google Drive, Dropbox, I think OneDrive. There's a bunch of them out there. I actually Googled them today, and the big long list of them, they all kind of changed. I don't know. There's a bunch of them out there. If you have a Google account, which most of us do, you can use Google Drive. It's very cheap. It's free. I think you can buy extra storage with Google Drive if you really wanted to. And that way you can work seamlessly, say with Google Docs, even different project files. You can share them back and forth. These platforms enable real-time sharing and editing of files. Hey, teamwork makes the dream work, man. You know what I'm saying? So especially if your team members are working things remotely, like most of us have co-hosts or hosts that are not living with us in the same house. I mean, I do, but most people don't. So if you're sharing files across the internet to a different person who's also on your show, one person takes care of the heavy lifting with the editing, one person takes care of the marketing, maybe one person creates the actual artwork for the episode, and you can share things back and forth using a online cloud-based situation. Now, one little tip on this is that if you decide to do it this way here, with everybody's got their hand in the pie trying to figure things out in a cloud situation, you're going to need to set the parameters so everybody has permission to edit and make changes to the audio files, or whoever you want to work on that audio file. Say, for example, you got Joe and Jim, and Joe's really good at editing the audio, but Jim's really good at editing the video. And for some reason, you don't want one working on one or one working on the other because they screw things up, and you kind of know that. You're like, hey, I'm not having him work on that. So maybe you can lock that one person out and give authorization only to one of them. Hey, it's your show. Do it however you want. But just remember that if you decide to use a cloud-based storage feature where you can share things between collaborators, it definitely will help you guys out, because now everything's stored on the cloud and everybody in the group has access to the file. Hey, by incorporating these practices in your workflow, you can maintain and organize an efficient podcast production process. Consistent folder structures, clear naming conventions, metadata embedding, version control, and cloud-based collaboration contribute to the streamlined workflow, making it much easier to manage, share, and locate the podcast files, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to locate that file you remembered from like 2 years ago. You're like, oh, what was that guest name? What was that episode number? the more things you embed into the file, the much easier it is to find it. If you know where to look too, by the way, because sometimes we've got files scattered all over our computer. So try to get organized, try to keep them in a concise place. Maybe name that file, name that thing podcast 1, podcast 2, whatever the name of your show is. Listen, it's your show. Do it how you want. But just remember, there's going to come a time where you're going to look back for episode 5 or episode 5 or 6, and you are on episode 506, and you're trying to find that file. You know where you put it. You know where it is. Having a streamlined storage solution, however you want to do it, will help you out in the long run. Hey, thank you once again for listening to this episode today. You know what every single podcaster really needs, other than a microphone, of course? Yeah, it's probably a website. My website is podtasticaudio.com. Very simple. Go ahead and check that out. I got all kinds of past episodes over there, information, a way to contact me, and I will catch you on the next episode.